Good evening, everyone. I am Danny Jaffer, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's Polk and Yamhill Counties, Oregon Congressional District 6 Candidate Forum. Tonight, we have six of the registered candidates. Dr. Matt West, PhD, Representative Andrea Salinas, Mr. Cody Reynolds, Dr. Kathleen Harder, MD, Mr. Carrick Flynn, JD, and Representative Teresa Alonso Leon. Thank you all for being here. Did I get that right?
Danny, I just said MPA. I have a master's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Administration. Since you're mentioning all the PhDs.
Yes, I would have done that. I actually had glanced at your bio, but I missed it. Sorry about that. Okay, I ask you all to very closely listen to the following format of instructions for tonight's event. Our forum tonight will last 2 hours and will consist of opening statements by the candidates, then 3 rounds of predetermined questions. That will be 2 sets of policy questions, sandwiching a lightning round of general knowledge questions. And then we'll finish with closing statements. Candidates are on notice to stay on time. There will be a countdown timer that is visible to each candidate, which will start after the candidate has been called to answer. The candidate will be muted when the timer reaches 0. The docket of candidates was randomized for opening statements and for the first set of questions, and then follows a first is now last round robin format for the following questions in an effort to give each candidate the opportunity to answer at least one of the questions first. At the opening, each candidate will be allowed 90 seconds to introduce themselves and state why they believe they are the best candidate to represent Oregon's new U.S. Congressional District. This should take us to approximately 7:30. We then move to our first policy round. Questions, and each candidate will be given 1 minute to answer each question. There will be 4 questions in the first round. Again, time of answer is critical. There will be a 5-minute break after the first round, around 8 to 8:05, as we set up for the lightning round. This will give candidates time to set up with pen and paper or dry erase board, your preference. The lightning round will be 10 questions, asked one at a time, and all candidates will answer the question at the same time by writing down their answer, not showing it, but writing down their answer. And after approximately 15 seconds, I will ask for all candidates to show their written answers on the screen. I will then state the answer if one is required. I ask the candidates, regardless of your compulsion, to refrain from making vocal comments while writing your answers. We will begin our final round at approximately 8:15, which will consist of 3 or 4 if time permits, policy questions following the same format as the first round. Again, 1 minute to answer the question. After the last question wraps up, approximately 8:40, we'll then move to closing statements, in which each candidate will have 2 minutes to provide some personal background on what brought you here and why you believe the 6th District is critical to Oregon and the U.S. Congress. I will close the forum after the final statements. Thank you all for listening. Now, we're going to move the opening statements and then the first round, and I ask that you all be brilliant. Our first candidate for opening statements is Representative Teresa Alonso Leon. You will have 90 seconds to introduce yourself and state why you believe you are the best candidate to represent Oregon's 6th District.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm the daughter of farm workers, sister of a Marine. I'm also a former union member. My family and I came to this country when I was just 4 years old. And unfortunately, we experienced a lot of hardships. We lived in extreme poverty. At one point early in my childhood, we lived in a house with no functioning plumbing. We had an outhouse. We had no running water inside the house, so we had to bring in water from the outside. As the oldest of 5, I had a lot of responsibilities, including having to translate and interpret for my family, and my parents, and my extended family. But I had, really amazing teachers who inspired me to go to college. And I absolutely did that. I earned my GED so I can go to college that much faster, and went and got my undergrad from Western Oregon University and my master's in public administration from Portland State University. I moved back home to Woodburn, and folks in that community asked me to consider a city council position, and I was appointed by the mayor, Kathy Figley. And then folks in the community asked me to run for state office, and I won a very hard race against a Republican with 20 plus more political years experience than me, and I won double digits because my constituents believed in me. And now they're asking me to run for Congress. In addition to having passed historical policies for our state, both historical and I would say, just transformational. I've been able to create opportunity for many of our underrepresented communities who have historically been not able to get involved politically. I pushed for access to
Okay,
language.
I'm sorry, time's up.
Oh, okay. The timer's not up, by the way.
Yeah, I noticed the timer didn't show on my screen either. So sorry about that. But that was good.
Thank you.
For whatever reason, we've lost the timer on the screen.
Okay, well, let's find you your questions. Hang on, everybody. Sorry about that.
Well, unless we can get the timer back on the screen, what I will do is have Kelly tell me when we're at 30 seconds and then and call time at the end of that. So, all right. Our next candidate is Mr. Cody Reynolds. And tell us, introduce yourself and state why you believe you're the best candidate to represent Oregon's 6th District.
Thank you, Danny. My name is Cody Reynolds. I'm a veteran, a West Point graduate, a businessman, and a longtime Oregonian. I often avoid telling my story because it reminds me of how vulnerable I have been in my life. My life hasn't been easy, but I have an appreciation and understanding for the important role that government plays in our lives, where it fails us, and where we have to do better. The reality is that too many Oregonians have been failed by our government, and politicians in Washington have no interest in solving the hard problems we're all facing because their loyalties are to special interests that don't align with those of the people. And I'm self-funding my campaign because I believe that the people of Oregon deserve a representative unbeholden to those special interests. And when I go to Washington, D.C., that's what you'll get. Me, unbeholden to anyone but you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cody. Let's move on then to Mr. Carrick Flynn.
Thank you. So I grew up poor and rural. That means food banks and clothes drives. We had no savings, no safety net. And that was before the flood of 96 basically destroyed everything we had. We were homeless for about 7 months. Like I said, no safety net. Now, with the help of some great teachers, I got a Ford family scholarship to attend the University of Oregon for free. I knew what this meant. I seized the opportunity. And because of this, I made it to Yale Law. Afterwards, I decided to pass up an opportunity to seek my fortune and instead chose to give back, working in disaster prevention and poverty eradication in some of the poorest places in the world. Eventually, I moved to Oxford, where I got involved in pandemic prevention and where I co-founded a research institute. Then on to Georgetown, so I could work more closely with the federal government. I did this working on legislation that should help bring thousands of good jobs to Oregon by bringing back manufacturing and computer chips to America. When COVID hit, I left Georgetown and moved home to Oregon. I started working full-time on pandemic prevention. And doing this, I was able to author part of Biden's pandemic prevention plan.
15 seconds.
Oh, no. Okay. So I've shown myself in my career to be good at getting results on things that matter most, providing security, stability, and opportunity for everyone, especially the most vulnerable. And that's what I'm going to do in Congress.
Thank you. All right, let's go with Representative Salinas.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Yamhill County and Polk County Democrats for inviting us here tonight. So I'm Andrea Salinas, and I am the grateful daughter of a Mexican immigrant who taught me that change is possible in a single generation. It is hard work, but it is worth it, and we have to fight for it. I look at my daughter, and I know that I'm ready to do that hard work for her generation and those who come after. It's possible, but we can't wait for it. We have to work for it every single day. And that's what I've done as a policy advisor to 3 members of Congress, as an advocate, and now as a state legislator. Here in Oregon, I've been part of legislative accomplishments that'll make a difference in the lives of working people by raising the minimum wage, enacting paid family medical leave, increasing access to affordable healthcare, including reproductive healthcare, and passing real environmental protections. These are the same policies that are being held hostage by politics as usual in Washington, D.C. Oregon families can't wait for Congress to do the right thing. The tough challenges of the pandemic have been felt by everyone, but especially for working families who are already falling behind. I don't just hold progressive values, I have delivered progressive victories here in Oregon. Now I'm so excited to do the same in Washington, D.C. as your next member of Congress from the 6th Congressional District.
Sorry, I'm muted. Okay, Mr. West.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Matt West. I'm running to tax the rich and save our planet. I'm doing this because we cannot wait any longer on climate change and fighting it. I have my PhD in studying renewable energy technologies, such as fuel cells. And when I graduated, I got a great job opportunity to go work at Intel. And I still remember to this day the feeling of the first time flying into Portland Airport and just being amazed by how beautiful everything was. The green, the snow on top of the mountains. But now that's gone. During the middle of summer, the snow is now gone. Its mountains are brown. The sky is brown from wildfire smoke. The green of our forests is turning black from charcoal and ash as wildfires rage against the forests in our cities. I'm in this fight to help fight climate change, but I believe the reason that we haven't done so yet is because there are billionaires and special interests who are currently profiting off of watching our world burn, both socially and physically. While regular families struggle to make ends meet during the pandemic, such as paying their rent, putting food on their tables, billionaires are jutting off to space to pretend to be astronauts for a couple of minutes and wear a fancy little cowboy hat. I believe the people of this district will vote to fight climate change, expand healthcare, and protect our democracy because this election matters.
Thank you very much. All right, and with the finally, Dr. Harder. You are muted.
Yes, I was. Thank you, Danny, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight. I appreciate the time. I grew up with very little. My mom took in laundry to help make ends meet from the factory across town. My dad was a brilliant but very tortured man and self-treated his mental illness, which resulted in a downward spiral of addiction. My mom took me out of that toxic environment when I was going into the 6th grade. With literally 2 suitcases, we moved out of state to start over. I started working in a clinical lab when I was just 14 years old, and that's when I thought just maybe I could go to medical school and learn how to use science to help people individually and personally. It took me 10 years to get that undergraduate degree because I had to work myself through school, and I started med school when my daughters were 2 and 4, which is not the route I would recommend for most folks. I have been very fortunate to have a fantastic career. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years and taking care of thousands of people in this district. I've been on the front lines of COVID for the last 2.5 years. I've heard everyone's stories. I've seen their struggles. The people in this district are my patients, my friends, and my neighbors. I'm running to build all of them a healthier Oregon for personal health, to healthy schools, healthy communities, and a habitable planet. We're facing major challenges from healthcare to homelessness, to the crisis in our schools, to the existential threat of climate change. This district needs someone to fight for them and to deliver for them, and that's exactly what I will do. I look forward to this discussion, and I hope I can win your support.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, candidates, for your introductions. Appreciate that very much. We're going to move on now to the first round of policy questions. And you'll each have 1 minute to answer. We're going to start with Dr. Harder. The first question has to do with war powers. Over the past 70 years, the Congress has effectively acquiesced their constitutionally required war power to the executive branch, with what has been termed by historians as disastrous results. This has led to U.S. military involvement in our nation's longest wars and the death and maiming of hundreds of thousands of American military men and women. Esteemed retiring Oregon Congressman Peter DeFazio has championed Congress reclaiming this authority for several years. In light of the ongoing disaster in the Ukraine and the president's stated policy of not engaging U.S. troops, are you in favor of Congress declaring war on Vladimir Putin and Russia? Why or why not? Dr. Harder.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, I think that it's the first thing we have to do is actually tell the Ukrainians how amazed we are by their solidarity, what they've done to protect their country and their culture. It's astounding. What they have done has been amazing. The fact that we have done what we have as far as punishing sanctions on Putin to stop this unwarranted aggression is the right path. I believe that we have to continue on that path. I would not recommend that Congress step in and declare war against Putin. We cannot escalate this crisis anymore. The sanctions are working. Putin is losing, and we have to just keep with our partners working in solidarity to continue this path and give the Ukrainians all the help that we can possibly give them.
Thank you very much. Next will be Representative Salinas. You'll have 1 minute. 1 minute.
Thank you. So when I served as a policy advisor to Congressman Pete Stark, foreign affairs and defense were part of my portfolio. He did not have a committee assignment that was armed services or the foreign affairs committee. However, there were a few engagements that the US had the war powers resolution to really fall back on. And we had to make some really tough decisions. That act was always meant to be a balance on the executive branch, the War Powers Act. And we have seen conflicts such as the Iranian conflict that George Bush entered us into, and Iraq, that should not have happened. And so, first of all, the War Powers Resolution needs some amendments so that Congress actually has the authority and the checks and balances. Second, I think we need to continue going down the path of providing Ukraine with the defense systems that they need, but not engaging at this point. And I think when the point happens, when the executive branch comes to Congress and asks for permission, Congress needs to have that check.
Time. Thank you very much. Next is Dr. West.
First and foremost, I absolutely stand with the Ukrainian people. The War Powers Act does need to be followed. The AUMF that we passed in 2001 needs to be rejected, and Congress should reclaim its authority over the military in this country and actually the declaration of war. We are looking right now at an atrocity of the highest order and an unjust war led by a madman. All of that said, we should not go to war. We cannot declare war on Russia, and we cannot have World War III. What we do need to do is provide support and resources to the Ukrainian people to protect themselves. And at the end of the day, should this all blow over soon, thank God, Putin must be tried for war crimes. We absolutely need to hold him to account once this is done.
Thank you. Next is Representative Alonso Leon.
Thank you. First of all, my heart goes out to all of the Ukrainian people. It is so unfortunate that not too long ago they were living their lives, and then from the next day They are just going through the worst experience that can be imaginable. So I am with them. And I think one of the things that we need to really focus on is once there's an opportunity for them to come to this country, that we open our doors and that we provide refugee support and ensure that they have the resources they need to come to this country and be supported. I don't support the idea of our country joining forces and fighting in this war. I don't think that that is the right thing to do right now. But I do want to make sure that we are providing the necessary support to ensure that Ukrainian refugees can come to our country so that they can feel safe and continue with their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you for the question. I'm the only one on this panel who understands the cost of war. I've lost friends in combat more than I care to remember. And it's the unfortunate reality that too often our leaders don't have a personal connection to the sons and daughters that we send into harm's way. Oregon's in danger of not having, for the first time in its history, a member of its federal delegation who does not have a connection to the military through their service as a veteran. I am that veteran that can represent Oregon and their sons and daughters. The answer to your question is no. We should not declare war on Russia. We should not declare war on Vladimir Putin. We need to make sure that the sanctions that we have already put into place are effective and that they're working. We need to ensure that we can apply maximum pressure in every avenue possible. To send America's sons and daughters into war in Ukraine, that is not the answer. And I would not vote to utilize the war powers granted to the United States Congress to do so.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you. I would say I completely agree with Dr. Harder. I think Putin is committing war crimes. I think his actions are not only heinous, but they're also extremely dangerous past their immediate results, because they threaten escalation, and they set a potentially very dangerous precedent. I support the severe sanctions against Russia. I think as much as possible, we should continue to increase pressure alongside preventing Russia from selling oil. I think we should be sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine, or rather continue to send humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but also weapons systems, including advanced weapons systems. I think Biden has been handling this very carefully. I support his approach here. And I think the U.S. should continue using our intelligence assets, and especially our signals intelligence assets, to aid Ukraine. I think our strong response here is unfortunately completely necessary. And now what's really important is that we have the political resolve to sustain it.
Thank you very much. Well, now you've seen how the first round works. All right, we'll move on to question 2. And first up will be Representative Salinas. And the question has to do with civil rights. This is a 2-part question. The Newburgh School Board has been in the spotlight nationally over the last year for banning political symbols from schools within their district, such as BLM and LGBTQ identifiers. In a moment where our nation seems to be focusing on economic and international affairs, how will you ensure that the civil rights issues of our time stay at the forefront of policy discussion? And more specifically, what systems of support will your office provide to rural BIPOC and LGBTQ kids to prevent them from feeling marginalized in their communities? And you have 1 minute again. Representative Salinas.
Thank you. So one of my first bills when I first came to the legislature in 2017, or actually 2018 was the bill, was to protect LGBTQ kids and kids from harassment in schools, and really providing our school districts with the powers and the resources to actually investigate bullying and harassment, because it is much more profound and prevalent than we actually realize. So under Title IX, the federal government absolutely has the power and actually has the requirement to protect all kids equally. And we need to start giving school districts the resources to do just that. And the federal government needs to play a bigger role in that. So we have the law in place. It's just not being enforced. And so by that, I mean, that includes teachers and what their civil rights are required for those students. And so I think we need to start using Title IX. Betsy DeVos rolled back a lot of these laws and administratively through administrative rule, but we need to bring them back.
Thank you. Next will be Mr. West.
Our country has a long and sordid history when it comes to racial injustice, as well as injustices against other marginalized groups such as LGBTQIA+. And I stand firmly with them. There needs to be, the Don't Say Gay law that's going on in Florida right now is completely unjust, completely inhumane, and it demonizes and marginalizes people further when in a time when they're already on the margins. We need to support rural LGBTQ kids in this district, especially because this is a matter of life and death. Being seen and being able to be yourself as you are is absolutely critical. I will do everything in my power to ensure that those who have been marginalized in the past will have the ability to speak for themselves and have their voices be heard. And we absolutely need people in office who are willing to say Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights, who are going to pass the Equality Act, who are looking to pass the ERA, but also expand it so that it includes gender identity and sexual orientation as well. This is extremely important, and it's very critical that we empower people to be themselves.
Thank you. Next, we move to Representative Alonso Leon.
Thank you so much for the question. As the chair of the Education Committee, I want to remind us that Oregon actually passed a law about over 10 years ago that really it focuses on equity, and that our education system should be considering equity in the way we work. The particular policy that you referenced in Newburgh really was focused on trying to make sure, and this is as a chair of the Education Committee, I brought this bill forward because I believe that our students should be seen and heard from the LGBTQ community, non-binary, gender-conformed students. Our students deserve to live in dignity and go to school and not have anybody harass them. That is incredibly important to me and incredibly important to the work I will do on a national level to ensure that everybody is seen and heard, and that their rights are protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Mr. Reynolds.
I agree with everything everybody else has already said, but what they didn't touch on was respect. I think that we in this country have reached the point where we can't have civil discussions around issues that inflame. And that scares me, that concerns me. You know, I'm not the kind of person who gets angry. I'm actually fearful for the direction our country is headed right now. And we need to be doing more to bring people together, to discuss, to understand, to empathize, and to love. We are a community. We are our friends and family and neighbors, and we need to be working to understand people. We need to be working to reach out and love. And that's what I'll do as your next representative from Oregon.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
I think we have a term for people who go out of their way to find people who are vulnerable and to make their lives miserable. That word is bullies. And I think we have a term for people who do this from, a state capital in North Carolina or Texas or a school board. And that's cowardly bullies. And I think Salinas is absolutely right. We have the resources and the programs to protect students, and we need to be implementing them very seriously. And I think perhaps, and maybe this is the move in Congress, we should be tying education funding to actual implementation and measures of implementation of these programs. I think certainly all students have a right to live authentically and safely, just same as everyone in the LGBTQI community has a right to live authentically and safely.
Thank you very much. Dr. Harder.
Thank you. LGBTQIA+ and all students need to be supported so that they can learn and thrive in their school environment. Critical race theory is not being taught in classrooms. All of these issues that are coming to the head right now are primarily Republican wedge issues, which just puts doubt in parents' minds and is a hidden agenda to pull funding away from public schools, pushing charter schools as the answer. That's not where we need to go for public schools to keep them healthy. I owe every bit of success that I've had in my life to the interactions I've had in public schools. We have to get back to helping them. We must accurately teach history, including the history of slavery, so that we understand the past and avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Above all, we have to get our kids back to where they need to be academically and help them get over the trauma they've experienced to prepare them for the jobs of the future.
Thank you. And I see that Commissioner Smith has actually been able to get logged in. I apologize for the delay and perhaps some confusion. But because we finished that question, I will allow Commissioner Smith to provide her 90-second introduction and reasons as to why she ought to be the next representative for the 6th District.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Thanks, if Megan is here, thank you for helping to put this together. My name is Loretta Smith, and I'm running for Congressional District 6. I believe that these days families are feeling squeezed from gas to groceries. And this moment, it calls for leaders who are willing to take on the fights to get results. That's how I've gotten things done in the past throughout my career, and that's what I plan on doing in the future. I believe that as a public servant, we need to improve the lives of small businesses, families, and working families. As a third-generation Oregonian, I was the first in my family to graduate from college, so I know how much an education can really change the trajectory of your life. I will put a lot of energy into working with our young people like I did at Multnomah County. We started with 25 kids, and we basically brought a program to 650 kids who didn't have summer and year-round jobs. Those are the kind of activities that I plan to do as a county commissioner. And for nearly 2 decades, I worked for U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, and I worked in every corner of this state, working to help those who are vulnerable, working to make sure that those voices and those constituent concerns around benefits were taken care of. And when we also had opportunities to put in policy, I worked on that as well. I drafted and passed over 100 pieces of legislation at the.
Your 90 seconds are up.
Okay, great.
I don't. Did you see the timer flag come up with the 30-second, the 15-second?
No, I wasn't looking for it.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I see it. I see it now. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was pretty evident to me that you weren't seeing that, so I just wanted to make sure. All right. Well, we're going to go on to our next question then, which is question number 3. And we're going to start with Mr. West. And I'm going to reiterate the instructions just a little bit here for Commissioner Smith. You'll have 1 minute to answer. You'll get a 15-second flag to wrap up. So I won't go into all the other instructions because I think that's really about all you need to know for this round of questions. So, we started out randomly, and then we're going on a round robin. So actually, you're going to be the second person to answer this question. Okay, first question, of course, the first person to answer will be Dr. West. So this is question number 3. It has to do with guns. Keeping in mind that an average of 22 veterans per day die by suicide, and more than half of those include the use of a firearm, the Gun Owners Caucus of the Democratic Party of Oregon is developing legislation that would allow gun owners experiencing suicidal ideation to temporarily hand their weapons without ammunition to a trusted third party. A similar law has successfully saved lives in Louisiana. Would you support a law of this nature on a national basis? Why or why not?
100% yes. This is a very personal matter to me. I have family members who struggle with suicidal ideation, depression. And for that reason, nobody in my immediate family has guns because guns kill people. Not only do they kill people who aren't the wielder, they often, and more often than not, harm the person who owns it themselves. So yes, if somebody is feeling suicidal ideation, please, for the love of God, seek help. Please surrender your firearms and seek treatment. I really can't go on more about that. Gabby Giffords was my representative when I was going to University of Arizona. And so when it comes to guns, firearms laws, it's a very personal issue for me on multiple fronts. And I do think we need to have better, stronger controls because while it is a right in the Constitution, it also states that it's for well-regulated militias. So we should pass some regulations on these things.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Smith, same question.
Same answer, yes, yes, and yes. I think it's so important that we deal with folks who have mental health challenges and offer drug and alcohol counseling whenever we can. I've lost 2 members of my family to gun violence this last year. And let me tell you, it doesn't feel too good. So I will be a champion for this. And yes, this is something that I would definitely support.
Thank you very much. Representative Alonso Leon.
Thank you so much, Danny. I absolutely support regulation laws on weapons. I am a sister to a Marine who fought in Afghanistan when the Twin Towers fell. And, he shared many stories with me around some of his veteran friends who experienced more trauma than he did. And, for me, one of the things that I want to make sure we protect are our children. And there's a lot of veterans who have families. And we want to make sure that if there are mental health issues with people in general, including our veterans, that they seek the help that they need and make sure that we are keeping our, guns away, whether they're, in specific gun cabins with a locked key to ensure that kids do not have access to it. Or in this case, in respect to your question, giving them to a third party to ensure that nobody has access to those guns. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Cody Reynolds.
This question is very personal to me. I was at West Point when the towers fell, and I've lost more. I've said it before. I've lost too many friends to suicide and gun violence over the past 20 plus years. But this is a mental health crisis that we're dealing with, and you shouldn't have to serve on the front lines to get the health care that you need. You should be able to go in to the doctor and get counseling. You should be able to get the medication you need to live a happy, productive, and full life. I would absolutely support this legislation, and I think it's a great first step towards mitigating the devastating effects of gun violence in our country.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flynn.
One of my close childhood friends was back from Iraq on leave for like 2 days, or he'd only been back for about 2 days, and he sat in his car and he shot himself through the head. And I think the mental health issues of veterans are something we really do need to take very seriously. I am surprised that this has to be a law. It seems like a very common sense thing. If someone is trying to hand over a gun, that you should absolutely take that. It's actually maybe mental health crisis for anyone who's got access to guns should be taken more seriously. Another thing I like about this law, other than it being obviously a great law, is it seems like the kind of thing that's actually agreeable on a bipartisan basis. And I do like the idea of starting a dialogue around like incremental, small, agreeable gun regulation laws to see if we can sort of unjam that whole mess. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Harder.
So first of all, my husband and I are both responsible gun owners, and I am very much in favor of common sense public safety laws. I would absolutely support the legislation you asked about, and also the behavioral health support that not just veterans, but all of us are badly needed right now. I would also support background checks for all gun sales, ban on large capacity magazines, ban on semi-automatic assault weapons, support red flag laws to make it harder for people with mental illness and those who have been involved with domestic abuse to purchase guns, laws to limit access to ghost guns and require all parts to have serial numbers and require safe storage.
Thank you very much. And let's go next to Representative Salinas.
Thank you. So while I love the intention of this idea for this legislation, I would be fearful that the person who has the suicidal ideation may be handing off a weapon to maybe somebody who does have a background of domestic abuse or maybe does have a background of criminal activity. And so I would just want to make sure that the person that is being given the weapon or the firearm actually isn't somebody who then could go out and use it to commit a crime. So I think there could probably be some tweaks to this idea because again, I actually think this is a public health issue and we need to take a step back and take a broader lens. And that's why I think the pediatricians came to our House Healthcare Committee when we actually had the firearm safety bill where we actually prevented firearms at schools and government buildings and required lock boxes. And it really was, I think, something that our public health and our physicians really do see, and ER doctors see this all the time. But a lot of it isn't, it needs to be addressed by a public health and a larger kind of public health response.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our fourth question. We'll start with Commissioner Smith. The question has to do with criminal justice. The American penal system is based on a punitive justice model. Criminal justice advocates have long argued that our high recidivism rates, as high as 80%, are caused by that model and often look to Scandinavian rehabilitative models with much lower recidivism rates, as low as 20%. For guidance on how to fix the system. As a congressperson, would you support a transition towards a rehabilitative model? And if so, what specific changes would you advocate for? If not, justify your answer.
We do need to change our criminal justice system. We need criminal justice reform. When I was running for city council, I dropped a criminal justice reform package that would take away the immunity that the officers have in terms of being charged with qualified immunity in terms of being charged with a crime. I think that there is some systemic racism within the system. There is an ecosystem that is not fair. We have police who actually, where they go out in the evening, they're in lower income and minority communities at a higher rate. And then when those folks go into the court system, they are given higher sentences and charged at a rate higher than everyone else. And then when they go into the jails, there's a little bit more use of force to, especially to Black and brown folks while they're in the jail system. So I think we need to tackle this in 3 different ways. We need to deal with the ecosystem in terms of how do we police a community? We can't have policing low income and communities of color at a higher rate than everyone else. We have to figure out the sentencing piece of it and what happens to those inmates when they're actually in jail. As a county commissioner, we were responsible for the jails. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Fine.
Thank you. Next will be Representative Alonzo Leon.
Thank you so much. We absolutely need to have criminal justice reform. We, as Loretta has mentioned, we have disproportionate numbers of folks of color in our justice system, and they are not treated equally. One of the things that I think is really important that we must do is in respect to the training our police officers receive. I don't believe we need to remove funding. I believe we need to invest in ensuring that our police officers are trained on cultural competence. I believe that they need to make sure they're trained on how to de-escalate situations. They need to work with our mental health and behavioral health professionals. They need to work hand in hand with them. And I believe that it's important that they are receiving just the best type of training that they can to ensure that they are working with our communities, especially our diverse BIPOC communities, in a way that needs to be different than how it's being done right now. And so I think that that's an important thing to consider. And we need to have additional hiring practices that we recruit more bilingual and bicultural officers. Thank you.
Fine. All right, Mr. Cody Reynolds.
So I have a podcast where I went into this discussion of specifically with criminal justice reform and remediation and job training. And I talked about it for an hour. And you can go to my website and you can find the link to it. But the bottom line is that we need to be focusing on the remedial aspects. We need to keep people, we need to close down the school to prison pipelines. We need to be focusing on providing people opportunities when they get out of prison. But the first thing we need to do is we need to realize that when you send a police officer into a situation, police officers by default escalate a situation. We need to be pairing social workers with police officers. The social workers are, I mean, most of the work that police officers do is nonviolent. There's non-confrontational. It's domestic disputes, and they're not trained to handle those sorts of disputes. Social workers are, and I would work to provide funding to community-based organizations that are providing that level of support in the areas that need it as your next representative from the great state of Oregon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Flynn.
Thank you. So one of my older brother's best friends when we were kids, he was a petty thief. The thing is, he was a really nice kid. He was really nice to me, which you aren't normally to your friend's little brother. And he had like sort of a playful way of stealing stuff. You know, that was like his personality. But of course, he ended up in juvie, and then he ended up in juvie again, and then he ended up in adult prison, and I completely lost track of him. He was in the system. And when I ran into him again, he was in his early 20s, and he was terrifying. He was angry, hateful, covered in prison tattoos, top to bottom. He was showing scars from stab wounds. He was talking about guns and violence, the violence he'd committed, the violence he wanted to commit. Now, the thing is, prison is extremely expensive. It costs a lot more than, for example, a year of tuition. And what that means is that in order to destroy this young, gentle kid's life and, turn him into, honestly, a danger to everybody, we probably could have, paid as much as we could have to put, I don't know, half a dozen poor rural kids through University of Oregon instead. And the thing is, we inflict the same injury on ourselves hundreds of thousands of times every year. Now, if Scandinavian countries have proven that you can do this better, then that's the proof of concept. The rest is implementation. It's a technical question. And all we need to do is take it seriously enough, which we should, this is heinous, to implement it. And I would absolutely get behind any sort of prison reform if I were elected to Congress.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Harder.
So I just have to push back a little bit on what Cody said. My stepdad was a police officer, and he took his job very seriously. And he did his very best to de-escalate almost every situation he was in until he could not. And I think what you said was a bit of a disservice to those people that are performing public safety roles in our community. But we do have to look to see what works and what doesn't work in public safety and invest in the best practices to address criminal justice reform. There's no question. We should require trauma-informed training of all police officers. We should use models such as the CAHOOTS model that's done in Eugene and is being implemented here in Salem to have people who work in teams to de-escalate situations, especially in mental health crises. With regards to the original question on the rehabilitation model, I think we need to look at the data and to be sure the variables are similar before we implement anything. I think it's a really interesting concept, and I would love to see people come out of prison with skills that will allow them to enter back into society.
Thank you very much. Representative Salinas.
Thank you. And going back to my healthcare lens and looking at this from a kind of a public health consequence, what we are seeing is that people actually, once they're incarcerated, are not getting the care and the rehabilitation that they need. And we're seeing this cycle of reincarceration constantly. And like you said, really low recidivism rates. And so what we need to do is to make sure that once they're in custody, that they are actually being funneled into the direct care that they need. And whether that's behavioral, mental health, addiction service, or sometimes it's economic. I always say, like, what has taken our society, our young people who feel like they need to commit crimes in the first place? They must not have their social needs met. And so we as a society are already failing given our huge incarceration rates. And absolutely, we need to take a lens to make sure that our BIPOC and tribal communities are served equitably as well. I'll just stop there.
That's perfect. Thanks. And finally, Dr. West.
The answer to your question is 100% absolutely yes. What we should be focusing on in this country is restorative justice, which will help to lead to healthier societies and actually solve the root problems of said crime. At the end of the day, there needs to be a path back from prison. A 3-year sentence should not become a de facto life sentence because of how the systems are structured against people who have paid their time and done their dues. We need to create a healthier system overall from top to bottom by abolishing private prisons, ending the war on drugs by legalizing marijuana, abolish the death penalty, end cash bail, reform police departments, improve working conditions for corrections officers, and also honestly improve the conditions for prisoners who are often in extraordinarily hot and dangerous prisons in some parts of the country.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all candidates. That was a good first round. And I think that constituents have gotten a good view. We are going to take a 5-minute break and let you set up for the lightning round. And I'll repeat the instructions. The lightning round will be 10 questions asked individually, and all candidates will answer the question at the same time by writing down their answer. Don't show it. And then after approximately 15 seconds, I will ask all the candidates to show their written answers to the screen. I'll then state the answer so required. And I ask the candidates, regardless of their compulsion, to refrain from making vocal comments while writing their answers. All right, so let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be back in just a few. Okay, I'm hoping you're all prepared for this lightning round of questions. And just to reiterate, you're going to write down your answer. And then when I ask you to, you're all going to show them to the screen at the same time. So this is not only a general knowledge type question, it's also to see how your hand and eye coordination works. So, all right, ready? The first question is, what is your favorite non-chain restaurant in the district?
Time.
Okay, that's 15 seconds. So on a count of 3, I'll have you all put up your answers. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I can't read.
Rubens.
Oh, okay.
Cheesecake Factory.
Cheesecake Factory, muchas gracias. Trapela, Papo, Rubens, Wine and Gruel. Growl. And the Cozy Taberna. All right. I think I got everybody's. Thank you very much. See how this works? All right. Ready for the second question? Yep. Commissioner Smith, you might want to write bigger letters. That's all. Which actor or actress would you want to play you in a documentary of your life? And it can be an actor or an actress. It's all right.
Time.
Time. All right, count of three. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, those are some good answers.
Good answers. Very good answers. Thank you very much. All right. They were all easily read that time, so I didn't read them out loud. All right. Question number 3. Who was the first presidential candidate that you voted for? Oh, not yet, not yet.
Time.
Time. Okay. All right. Show your answers. All right. Thank you very much. Question number 4. Are vineyards farms?
Time.
Time. All right. Show your answers.
Not legally.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much. All right. Question number 5. Name the county seats of Yamhill and Polk counties.
That's time.
And wait till I ask you to put your answers up. All right. Looks like everybody's ready. Go ahead. You can't be looking at other people's answers and then put it down. The answers are McMinnville and Dallas. All right. Question number 6. What is Oregon's state bird? This eliminates those that were not 4th graders.
Time.
I'm going to give you a couple extra seconds because it looks like people are still writing. Give me a thumbs up when you're done. Smith? Ready? Okay. Show us your answers. Well, at least Cody Reynolds is honest about that. The answer is the Western Meadowlark. Okay, number 7. What percentage of the district of CD6 is experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity? So what percentage of the population in the district is experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity?
Time.
Time's up. Ready? Show your answers. The answer is 15%. Okay. Question number 8. I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this one. List the counties in CD6 in order from largest to smallest in terms of the number of voters in CD6, and what percentage of each county's total population falls within CD6. So I'll reiterate that. List the counties in order from largest to smallest based on the number of voters that actually reside in CD6 in those counties, and what percentage of that county is within CD6. This one kind of takes the lightning out of the lightning round. You have 5 seconds. All right, time's up. Show us your answers. Good. Okay. The answers are Marion County, Washington County, Yamhill County, Polk County, and Clackamas County, in that order. The percentage of voters within those counties that actually vote in CD6, for Marion County, it's 83%. For Washington County, it's 31%. For Yamhill County, it's 100%. For Polk County, it's 100%. And for Clackamas County, it's 9%. Question number 9. In the 2020 general election, in which state did you cast your ballot? Time. Okay. Good, thank you. The final question, question 10. If you receive a $10 million grant to use in the district any way you want it, what project would you spend it on? Time. Okay, show us your answers. And I'm sure there can't be a single wrong one in here. So pull it back. Yeah. There we go. Housing, after school activities, housing, homelessness, mental health, substance abuse, fully funded food banks, and those kitchens providing meals to those in need. All right, well, thank you very much. All right. We are now moving on to our second policy round. That was a lot of fun, actually, you know. And these are policy questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. And question 5 begins with Representative Alonso Leon. And the question is regarding seniors like me. The populations of Polk and Yamhill counties are aging, and many are looking to retire in the near future. At the same time, our costs of living and housing are skyrocketing. What specifically do you plan to do to protect those on fixed incomes? You have 1 minute.
Thank you so much for that question. So one of the things I definitely want to do is protect Social Security. I hope that we can figure out how to increase it. You know, I've spoken to many folks in this district who said, Social Security is not enough for me to live on. It doesn't change very often, and the cost of living continues to grow. And so I want to make sure that our elders are protected and that they can live with dignity by having the appropriate funding in respect to Social Security to ensure that they can live their lives in the way they see that is the best way for them. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Reynolds.
We absolutely need to protect Social Security. We need to be certain that the cost of living adjustments that we are passing in Congress are meeting the needs and exceeding the rapid rise in costs that everyone is experiencing in everything from food to gas. I grew up I grew up poor, and we had a man who he would dumpster dive for food out of the back of a Safeway, and he would come to our house and he would bring us food, and nobody should have to eat food pulled from a dumpster. We need to be doing more to protect the most vulnerable among us, and it's a very personal thing for me, and I will do that. I will do everything I can to ensure that nobody has to live the life the way I've lived it when I'm your next representative from Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be Mr. Flynn. I saw you were out there. Did you get to hear the question?
Yeah, I heard this one. Yeah. It was Social Security.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I was running around when I was trying to fix something. So what it is, certainly after a lifetime of hard work, when they've been paying into Social Security, they should get what they paid for at a bare minimum. And honestly, being able to retire with dignity is huge. I think before Social Security, I don't remember the number exactly, something like 80% of the elderly were in poverty. And even now, if you were to remove Social Security payments, it'd be something like 40%. It's I think at 10% or below with Social Security. So this is, even aside from like the fairness argument, this is an incredible social program in terms of the effect it has. And effect it has on people where there isn't an alternative necessarily. You can't necessarily go back to the workforce. I also think you can see a lot about society, how they treat, their elders. And I think that it would reflect poorly on us if we didn't increase Social Security and like absolutely stabilize it and at a minimum secure it. And same with Medicare and Medicaid. While also working to make these things more affordable, as with the prescription drug bargaining, we pay something like 4 times as much as other developed countries. I think that obviously falls hugely disproportionately on our seniors who should not have to bear it. So yeah, I'd absolutely support measures. Okay.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Hart.
Thank you. Yeah, Social Security needs to be shored up, as does protecting workers' retirement benefits. Those should not be able to be touched by anyone. Those were promised to them. One of the biggest costs that older folks have sorry, I don't know where that came from. Is the cost of prescription drugs. We need to be sure that Medicare can negotiate the price of all prescription drugs so people don't have to make the choices between their medication and their groceries. Medicare needs to cover dental, hearing, and vision services, and people should not have to pay their way into poverty in order to be able to access long-term care, especially long-term care in their homes. Those are all things that need to be done to be sure that people have a respectable end of their lives. We're going to see a tsunami of folks over the age of 80 coming into our communities, and we need to be prepared to be able to let them have the dignity in their golden years.
Thank you very much. Next is Representative Salinas.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would agree with, I think, folks on this forum tonight. Social Security needs to be shored up. We need to make sure that we're not thinking about privatizing it in any way. It's a social safety net. It is not a stock market gamble. We need to do the same thing with Medicare. Medicare Advantage is becoming more favorable to a lot of seniors because they can get better benefits and the cost share isn't as much. They don't have to pay as much. We also do need to be making sure that prescription drug prices are lowered, and not just the co-pays, but the actual from the manufacturer. Those prices need to be lowered. And we do need to figure out how people actually retire in place. And that means making sure that their housing is stable. We know that 40% of Oregonians are in rent unstable situations, and those include seniors. And right now at the federal level, Senator Sherrod Brown has an actual rental emergency that's bipartisan rental emergency kind of provision where people can step in and just say, hey, I have an emergency. This is coming up. And this happens for seniors all the time. So let's make sure seniors can stay in place.
Thank you very much. Next is Dr. West.
The best way to help people who are on a fixed income is to raise that income. Social Security needs to have its cost of living adjustment adjusted, and the prices of accurately representing what people pay these days for goods. We need to go back and adjust the cost of living numbers that we currently have and retroactively raise them. Social Security is the most effective program this country's ever done at reducing poverty, bar none. And we absolutely need to make sure that it's expanded, protected, and defended as we move forward into the face of increasing inflation. At the same point, as many people noted, that medical costs are skyrocketing. And so what we need to do is we need to make medical care free at the point of service and allow for Medicare to actually negotiate drug prices with the behemoths that are currently price gouging our entire country.
Thank you very much. And now Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I think there are a couple of different ways that we can make housing more affordable for seniors, and that is to expand Social Security. But the other piece is Medicare. We need to take off the penalty. If you don't sign up for Medicare 4 months before, 2 months afterwards, and you've paid into Medicare all these years, you cannot go back on and get on Medicare. So they're paying a large portion of their monthly paycheck towards healthcare. The other piece is to attach the COLA to Social Security with the inflation rate, because gas, groceries, and diapers and detergent and those things that seniors use and that they help with, it's going crazy. And I think we need to deal with the prescription drugs. If we reduce the amount of prescription drugs, that's going to be an issue. And make sure that we, and I did talk about the changing the formula. So I think that those would be some ways that we can increase. The other piece is we need to increase the HUD budget because it's only $49 billion. If we increase that to maybe 200, we might be able to help more seniors.
Thank you. Thank you all for your answers. Okay, we're moving on to question number 6. This will first go to Cody Reynolds, and it has to do with water and water resources. There are at least 5 watersheds that fall entirely within the boundaries of the new Congressional District. These watersheds provide drinking and potable water to almost all districts, to all district residents, but are at an increasing risk due to climate change. Recently, the watersheds that supply water to Klamath County and other areas in the state have run dry. What specific plan would you propose to ensure that our waters remain clean and accessible into the future?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question, Danny. I see this as an infrastructure issue. I had the wonderful opportunity to tour the district with Casey Cullen, and he took us up into the coastal range, and we got to see the forests that protect and clean the water that falls from the sky. And he took us to the water treatment facility that feeds into the town of Yamhill, and he explained that it's 100 years old. Those pipes are leaking. Most of the water that's getting served from the treatment facility is ending up in the ground, wasted. We need to be doing more to invest into our communities, especially our rural communities, especially those communities that are lacking the infrastructure that they need to provide a happy, healthy, and a happy and healthy climate for their citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flynn.
So, I mean, this is obviously a very technical question with a technical issue or a technical response. I don't actually know what the appropriate response would be on that level in terms of raising the level of the watershed. I know that there's been some work doing this for agricultural uses elsewhere that somehow works, but again, I'm not like a civil engineer. My guess would be that the appropriate approach would be like in the near term to like do a very serious like federal study and figure out what the issues are and what are the realistic ways of actually raising the water table or reducing the effect on the water table. So commission something like that, and ideally have something on the other side where you task the like the Army Corps of Engineers or someone to actually implement this thing, because obviously you need the water. This is an agricultural area. Also, you need water to drink and live on more generally. I don't know specifically past that. I don't think I want to pretend that I do.
Thank you very much. And we'll go next to Dr. Harder.
Thanks, Danny. So whatever we do needs to be based on science and data. And that's one of the reasons that I would support legislation such as House Resolution 2820, which authorizes the USDA to provide farmers and ranchers and private forest owners with technical assistance to help with sustainable land practices and to reduce and mitigate climate change and help to sequester carbon and be sure that the water is adequate and learn how to farm in a very different climate. So these are the important things that need to be done, but it needs to be done based on science and data. We have a unique opportunity in Oregon to have forests that we are using for research purposes, and we can actually drive this research and be able to scale it nationally. So I'm excited to be in a place where we can actually do the work here and get some results quickly to help solve this problem.
Thank you very much. Move next to Representative Salinas.
Thank you. And I know water rights is a big issue here in Oregon at the state level. The federal government doesn't have a real play in the water rights issue. However, we do have a role in climate mitigation and adaptation. And for mitigation, I would say we need to look towards conservation. So we're really trying to figure out how the federal government helps to provide incentives to our forests and our agricultural lands to have them as working lands where they're actually incentivized to conserve water and do the right crop rotations and that sorts of things and more sustainable forestry. That will help us. And then the second piece is that adaptation, which means storage. And there are ways, and going back to, yes, I am not an expert in this area. I'm not the Army Corps of Engineers, but there are ways where we can help use the existing water table to help store water. And we've done it for agriculture, and we can certainly do it in this district, but we need to start doing it now. And it requires a huge investment, and the federal government is the perfect place to go.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to Dr. West.
Like everyone's been saying, this is an incredibly technical and nuanced issue, and this is the reason I'm running for Congress. This is an existential threat to our communities. Water is life, full stop. We need to protect our water sources in Oregon. For example, not only do the forests that we currently have help to clean and purify our waters and make sure that they don't get hit with runoff from various rainfalls and mudslides, but every single water source that was tested in a recent study was found to have microplastics in it. 40 out of 40. That is massive. When you look at PFAS chemicals, they are everywhere in the state of Oregon. For example, there's a huge polluted source underneath the Portland airport. We need to fight hard to stop climate change. We need to invest in infrastructure to alleviate droughts in townships, such as the biggest issue in Yamhill, which is helping to get water from their reservoir all the way to the city. That's a perfect opportunity to provide good investments in communities and good union jobs.
Thank you very much. And let's go now to Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. What I would do is go to my old alma mater at Oregon State University and get some of the smartest folks who know more about this than I do, bring stakeholders to the table like the Yamhill watershed folks, and go over to Polk County and get folks at the Grand Ronde and others throughout the district that would serve in some of those areas, and try to find out the best practices on how to deal with some of these issues, because the issue around water is not going anywhere. Farmers, ranchers, and even the tribes, they have issues with water. And so we need to make sure that if we do not cut our carbon footprint down, we're going to have these same issues with fires, and they're going to increase. So we have to figure out how to do this quickly.
Thank you very much. And finally, Representative Alonzo Leon.
Thank you so much. Protecting our watersheds means protecting our waters. And I'm on the camp that we need to work with all the experts. This is not my area of expertise, and do really believe that we need to connect with people who can provide us the guidance that we need to ensure that we are protecting our water sources, that we maintain clean water for drinking, and enough water for our agricultural community, and ensure that all of our communities have the opportunity to have the sufficient water that they need to survive and thrive in their respective communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your answers. Moving on now to question 7. And this has to do with rural resources, rural natural resources. Many people believe that natural resources are the most important industries in the district. But the truth is, the largest industries are public education and healthcare. Despite this, both are underfunded, difficult to access for many, and under siege by the right wing. For instance, we have too few mental health care providers and no abortion care services. And Republicans are putting up extremist candidates for school boards. If elected, what specific actions would you take to promote medical and mental wellness and strengthen public education for your constituents? And we begin with, I should tell you this before, we begin with Mr. Carrick Flynn.
Is it on now? Okay. So I grew up in a very rural area. I grew up where resources were seen as the most important thing, obviously. And this was during the Timber Wars. The healthcare clinic in my town was absolutely terrible. I would never take my kids there. The schooling system was okay. There were some really heroic teachers, is what I would say. The system itself, obviously dramatically underfunded. Teachers were paying for everything out of pocket. But this is the kind of where heroic teachers come from, maybe. What I would like to see is obviously more funding for rural health access. I think this is obviously extremely important with things like reproductive health care. I think it's also very, very important when talking to stuff like LGBTQI resources. This is something that would, honestly, like thinking about where I grew up, you just couldn't do it there. Like, maybe you could now, but like not at the time. And that's absolutely unacceptable. So I think it's just the funding routes are special programs to facilitate rural education as best you can, keep the schools adequately funded, provide probably some extra vocational schools, vocational training to like attract more of the kids and keep them in school. And past that, like certainly medical, either direct health spending for clinics or more telemedicine or something for more specialized uses, since it is really hard in rural areas to get to an urban center that might have that.
Thank you very much. Dr. Harder.
Thank you, Danny. You know, it's interesting in this state, we have a really high percentage of our population that is covered by insurance, and yet so many people can't access the insurance they have, either because of high copays and deductibles or because providers are just not available. We see this particularly in mental health and behavioral health. Oregon is 49th in the country in access to behavioral health services. It's an absolute crisis. So we have to do whatever we can to provide funding to incentivize people to go into behavioral health. What we have to do in the short term is take advantage of some technologies we have. So for example, telehealth has worked remarkably well during COVID. We need to be sure that telehealth services, particularly behavioral health via telehealth, is available to everyone in the state. We also need to be sure that the schools can embed behavioral health providers via telehealth into the schools to help kids who are struggling. This is a true crisis in our country right now, and very much so in this state. We have got to help folks get through the behavioral health crisis they are, so that they can become fully functional and thrive in this community. So yeah, I could talk about healthcare all night long, but
well, your time's up, so you'll have to do it later. Okay, Representative Salinas.
Thank you. As a state legislator, we made a huge investment, and I was a big supporter of the Student Success Act, which actually made an unprecedented investment and really geared a lot of the funding towards the ability of our education system to provide mental health services now, at least mental health access for our kids in schools. But we have a big flight of teachers right now, and the federal government needs to step in, give greater voice to teachers to make sure that our educators are in place, especially in the special ed arena. We also need to do the same thing with healthcare. We've been expanding healthcare here in Oregon. I helped pass the nation's most comprehensive reproductive health equity bill. And yes, we do have deserts, but we actually have more protections here than we do in most states. We need to be doing that at the federal level, especially with with Roe v. Wade pending at the Supreme Court. So I think a Medicare for all or universal type of access to care health program is what is actually needed. But until then, there are lots of things we can do in the interim.
Thank you very much. Dr. West?
This isn't an issue of technological development and telehealth and all those other issues. This is an issue about funding. At its core, we need to move towards Medicare for all, full stop, single payer especially. No one in this country should have to be forced to choose between living or dying. My best friend was just in OHSU having both of his kidneys removed due to genetic disease. And the fact that kidneys are the only organ in the nation that have nationalized healthcare is why he's able to be fine now and be on dialysis. This is critical. We need to increase funding for both healthcare issues, mental health care as well. Single payer Medicare for all needs to cover the entire body. That includes mental health care and women's reproductive health care. We need to ensure that healthcare is accessible to everyone at the point where they need it. And we need to ensure that we are funding and supporting our teachers so that they are able to do their jobs and actually speak about who they are and let the kids also talk about who they are.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. When I was at Multnomah County, I noticed that Black and Brown kids were not graduating from high school. So I led an effort of community-based organizations with Latino Network, Self-Enhancing Inc., and ERCO, and NAIA to identify federal funding that they could use to make sure that they had wraparound supports that would help students, which also kind of led the way for the Student Success Act. What I would do for rural communities is the same thing. I would try to go find some HRSA money out of the HHS budget to pull together community-based organizations in those rural communities to identify additional funding sources. And I would also, again, still fight for those county payments, because without those county payments, small rural communities, they're not able to have services from law enforcement to healthcare to the rural schools. So we need to make sure that we know where those dollars are. And I worked on those on those appropriations for many years. So I know where the dollars are. We just have to make sure that we get the right people around the table to make sure that we apply for the money and get the backing of our entire congressional delegation to do that.
Thank you. All right, Representative Alonso Leon.
Thank you so much for this topic. I think it's very important. In addition to the policies that Rep. Salinas mentioned that I also voted and advocated for, I also helped ensure that we passed a law that increased the number of professional mental and behavioral health folks to be able to increase the need of our mental and behavioral health among our kids and adults. One thing I want to mention that's really important too, in addition to increasing professional behavior and mental health professionals working in our communities, we need to make sure that they have the training to be culturally responsive, that they are bilingual, that they understand the diversity of our communities, because it's really important to consider all those aspects as our communities are becoming more diverse. I also passed a law, the Regional Health Equity Coalitions that work in rural communities to address the social determinants of health. And I 100% agree, we need to have universal health single payer to ensure that all of our community members across the country have access to affordable, accessible health care from head to toe. I completely agree, and we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And same question, final is Cody Reynolds.
I spent an entire day in Petey, Oregon, touring farms and the communities that exist in places that I'd never heard of before. And I asked them what they need. And they tell me they need infrastructure. The people of rural Oregon need infrastructure. Before we even talk about telehealth and teleeducation, we need the infrastructure to support that. The reality is that rural Oregon and rural communities across this country are dying. They're aging in place. In the valley, in the town of Petey, the average age is 65 years old. These communities need to be revitalized. We need to encourage young people to move there. We need to encourage the people who were born there and raised there to stay there. And to do that, we need to be building and investing in those communities in terms of everything everybody's already talked about. But we need to recognize and ask these people what they need and what they think they need to help them create the vibrant communities that they all want. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've gotten through the three questions of the second round. If everybody is willing, we can throw one more question in. It's a time crunch situation, and I'm still going to give you your 2 minutes at the closing, but I'd like to find out if you'd all be open for one more question. Just give me a thumbs up if you are, and a thumbs down if you're not.
Eric is saying no.
Well, it's 6-1. So, and I don't want to feel that I'm putting anybody on the spot, and I know people have places to get to. So we can dispense with a last question then, and we'll move to the closings instead. In your closing statement, this district is assumed to have a D+3 lean, and the entire country will be watching. What is your approach to beating the Republican candidate in November? Do you have a plan to engage non-affiliated voters? If you don't win in May, how do you plan to stay involved in CD6 politics in the future? I'm going to repeat that. So this is your closing, and these are some things we'd like you to touch on. The district is assumed to have a D+3 lean, and the entire country will be watching. What is your approach to beating the Republican candidate in November? Do you have a plan to engage non-affiliated voters? If you don't win in the primary, how do you plan to stay involved in CD6 politics into the future? So On my randomized list, I've got Cody Reynolds starting this off, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Danny. I don't think I'll need the full 2 minutes, but I appreciate that. My plan is simple. I want to represent all Oregonians. That's conservatives, liberals, progressives, socialists, communists. I want to represent everyone. And you do that by listening. You do that by engaging. And I'm already doing that. I'm out talking to people every day. I'm asking them what's important to them. What are they passionate about? What do they worry about when they go to bed at night? Because that is what matters to me. This race is turning out to be something that nobody ever expected it would turn out to be. It has become a spectacle, so to speak. And I don't think any of us wanted it to turn out this way, but it has. And the reality is that to represent the people of Oregon, we have to listen. We have to be willing to work with those people who we may disagree with. We have to ask them and talk to them about those things that matter to them. Because this country, we're at a crossroads right now where neighbors can't talk to neighbors, family members can't talk to family members. And it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to have conversations, honest conversations, fact-based conversations about what's important to us, about why things are important to us. And that's exactly the sort of ethos that I will bring to Washington, D.C. for the people of Oregon, because I'm self-funding this campaign because I do not want to be beholden to those special interests that may influence the decisions or opinions of others. And this race is about the people of Oregon, and it will always be about the people of Oregon to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cody. Next is Carrick Flynn with your closing, 2 minutes.
So I would absolutely try and speak with independence. I think the way I like to speak to people anyways is by positively showing a vision. This isn't like a very political approach, but just sort of like, here's the policy proposal, and here's why this matters. I'm also trying to lean more back into the fundamentals. This is like the stability, the security, the prosperity aspect. And this is something that's very agreeable everywhere. I'm back in Virginia talking to people who will never vote for me in a million years, but friends. And when you talk to them about like what really matters, not only these surface concerns, but like what really matters to them, you kind of get into the conversation. It's almost always their children and, their grandchildren. And, or to some extent, it's like, they're worried about their parents. I think we all, especially with COVID, we all worried about our parents. And, that means, secure Social Security, it means good Medicare. It means, if you're trying to talk about security and stability, it means, living wages, jobs you can have that support your family and actually have enough savings that's a cushion. There's no better social net than, a job that, can pay your bills and a safety net, and a savings account. And I think by style, I listen, I talk. I don't use very partisan argumentative. I'm not very partisan argumentative. I actually do just want to engage and get the problem solved. And that's been the approach I've taken generally. It's like, what's the problem? What's the approach? Let's work together. If I have time, I don't see the counter. So all my brothers are craftsmen. I have 3 of them. Sorry. 3
You're
brothers,
okay.
they're all craftsmen. I'm out.
30 seconds.
Okay. I have 3 brothers. They're all craftsmen. They're all very skilled craftsmen. They work with their hands. And when they approach a problem, there's some problem. It's a new thing. They figure it out. They use they bring out their tools. They measure twice. They cut once. And the goal is actually just to get the thing done as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And that's how I want to approach policy. And that's how I explain myself as wanting to approach policy. Like, I don't want to do the politics. This isn't debate club for me. Like, I want this to be, wood class or wood shop. I want to like get the thing solved. And I think that resonates. It seems to have resonated.
Thank you very much. All right, Representative Salinas.
Thank you. So I have a history of working on legislation that requires bipartisanship and requires hearing the voices of lots of people. I just was the lead champion on a bill to move farm workers to overtime pay. And I had to work with the agriculture industry, the growers, the wine industry, to make sure that their voices were heard and understood and needed. And we passed that bill. And I'm so proud of it. I've had to work with folks like on all sides of healthcare to figure out how we start to lower the cost of healthcare and make sure that hospitals are held accountable for their charitable contributions that they get in exchange for tax relief. So I know how to do this. I've been doing it for a number of years. I know how to talk to all different stripes of people. So I'm really eager to continue that. I think it's why I have been supported by Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, who has represented 40% of this district, by Governor Brown. They've worked with me. They understand that I know how to bring people together to actually get results. And I think that is a winning challenge, or a winning formula for beating the Republicans. I have the endorsements of all kinds of unions, the Oregon Education Association, SCIU, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. This is a grassroots groundswell of support. And people at OLCV aren't Democrats or Republicans. They're people who care about climate. Same thing with teachers. Of course, they're independents and non-affiliated teachers and Republicans and Democrats. And they want the best for their kids and their students and their classrooms. And so that is the kind of support I'm getting. And that is what's going to win in November.
Thank you. Moving next to Dr. West. You will need to unmute yourself.
I pushed the button. I guess I must have just missed it. My apologies. What I was saying was, thank you again, everyone, for being here. This is an incredibly important election. This election is a referendum on our democracy, our values, and whether or not this district can be bought. I have no intention of sitting on my hands when it comes to the greatest existential threat humanity has ever faced. My activism has been focused on pushing our government to take that threat seriously, and I will not stop fighting until America is carbon neutral, until workers' rights are respected, until billionaires and corporations are held accountable for their actions. I will always be here to fight for this. I've spent my life on this, and I'll be here May 18th, whatever happens.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Going forward into the general election, I've had a history as well as working with people, private sector, public sector, working with folks who are working families, families of color, farmers and ranchers. I think what we need to do is we need to take politics out of it and put people back into this district. I don't think that this district is being made a spectacle of, but I do think that this district is highlighting the need to get dark money out of politics. Because when you have a voice, particularly a voice like mine, who's worked in the Congress for over 20 years, who's been an elected official for 8 years, who's passed over and authored over 100 resolutions and ordinances around different things, from curing the digital divide, keeping seniors in their homes, trying to make sure that we recycle our computers and all those kinds of things. We need to make sure that we have someone that can reach out and that they don't have a problem with having forums, town hall meetings, sidewalk office hours, because that's where you get the information. I don't create policies from the top down. I create policies from the bottom up. You have to go out and listen to people, find out what their needs are. I had a town hall meeting for Black and brown men when I first got into office. It was 250 Black and brown men from the age of 14 to 74. I asked them, what did they want? This was not a gang meeting. How could we be helpful? And what they said was, we used to have summer jobs for our kids. Our kids don't have summer jobs. So that's how I started the Summer Works program with 25 kids and grew that into 650 kids. We need to do the same thing in District 6. Just like Head Start is a big deal for urban kids, migrant Head is equally important to rural kids. We have to make sure that we're talking to everyone. I don't know everything, but what I do know is it doesn't matter if you're Republican or you're a Democrat. If you need help, and that's what I see, people need help in District 6, and I want to offer them some solutions to help solve their problems.
Thank you. Let's go to Dr. Harder. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm the best candidate for this position because I'm a part of this district. I am the only one that has lived here, worked here, and raised a family in this, in the heart of the district. And I'm proud to say I can vote in this election because I live here, and I will not be bought or directed by special interests. I really understand the needs of the people in this district. I've taken care of thousands of them as patients. I've been there for them during their most challenging times. You know, I have discussions with people all over the district, and I get a really similar response. People are shocked that I've actually called them and asked them, what's important to you? How can I help you? And I talk to Republicans and Democrats and unaffiliated alike. It doesn't matter. When I take care of a patient, it doesn't matter what their political views are. I have to learn in a very short period of time to meet them where they are, understand what they need, and help them to get to their goals. I gotta tell you this, share this story with you. My husband has been a lifelong Republican, and now I call him a recovering Republican because I've convinced him to come to the side of the party of yes, as opposed to the party of no. So we don't have time for politics as usual. The American people and the people in Oregon need to get some wins. It's the only way to break the back of hyperpartisanship. And the only way to do that is to have somebody like me that can actually win in this election in the fall against the Republicans. So I hope I can get your support.
Thank you very much. And to wrap it up on the closing, Representative Alonso Leon.
Thank you so much, Danny. So I just want to remind folks that I grew up in this district. I went to Jervis Elementary School, I went to Woodburn Middle School and part of Woodburn High School, and graduated with my undergrad in social science from Western Oregon University. Like, this is my community. A big portion, District 22 is part of who I am. I want to share that in my 3 terms as a legislator and 3.5 years on the Woodburn City Council. So I've almost served as a public servant almost 10 years and have helped pass progressive laws like Cover All Kids to ensure 100% of our kids have health insurance. I helped pass pay equity to ensure that we are paying people justly. I helped pass one of the strongest reproductive rights policies. I was part of the committee, the work group that helped develop the language for family paid and medical leave, which is one of
Representative Alonso Leon, looks like you froze. That's very unfortunate, but that goes to some of those statements about infrastructure being very important, which is why I'm not actually in my own office this evening, because I don't have high-speed internet out in at my place out in the country. So hopefully she'll get back in, but in the meantime, what I'd like to do then is go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for being here and attending this evening and being on the panel. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the constituents appreciate it and appreciate hearing your answers.
Yes.
I expect you'll probably all get some follow-up in your inboxes in the next couple of days, and probably a lot more as you get closer to May 17th. For the voters, don't forget to get your ballots into the mailbox or Dropbox by May 17th. And thanks again to the Polk County and Yamhill County Democratic Central Committees, and special thanks to Gustavo Guerrero, Megan Corvus, Beth Vaughn, and Kelly McWilliams. And I'm Danny Jaffer. And Teresa, I'm going to give you just about 10 seconds if you want to say something else.
Thank you so much. I also want to mention that I have been doing national work in respect to policy. I belong to the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, who named me their Legislator of the Year this year. And I have also been recognized internationally. Mexico gave me their highest honor and recognition for the work I have done as a legislator. So I just want to acknowledge that I am doing this work already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I was saying, thank you all for being here. I'm Danny Jaffer. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you all so very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.